The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red as a bus pulled up to the gates of the military training camp. Dust swirled around the tires as it came to a stop. The doors creaked open, and a group of nervous recruits stepped out one by one. They were all young men and women, their faces a mix of excitement and fear. Some carried duffel bags slung over their shoulders, while others clutched small backpacks tightly in their hands. This was the beginning of their journey into the unknown. Among them was Marcus Johnson, a tall and athletic young man with dark skin and sharp features. He stood quietly at the back of the group, his eyes scanning the area. The camp stretched. Out before him, a wide expanse of dirt roads, barracks, and obstacle courses. It looked nothing like home, but Marcus wasn't here for comfort. He had signed up for this because he wanted to serve his country, just like his father once did. His father's stories of bravery and sacrifice had always inspired him, and now, Marcus was ready to follow in his footsteps. As the recruits gathered outside the bus, a figure emerged from one of the nearby buildings. Drill Sergeant Harold Hank Briggs walked toward them with long strides, his boots crunching against the gravel beneath his feet. He was a big man with broad shoulders and a stern expression that seemed carved into his face. His uniform was perfectly pressed, and his hat sat squarely on his head. Everyone immediately fell silent as he approached. Briggs stopped a few feet away from the group and crossed his arms. His piercing blue eyes scanned the line of recruits, taking them all in. Then, without warning, he barked, "Attention!" The recruits scrambled to stand straight, some fumbling clumsily in their haste. Briggs smirked slightly, clearly enjoying the effect he had on them. "You maggots think you're soldiers?" he growled, pacing back and forth in front of them. "Let me tell you something right now. You're not even close. You're weak, lazy, and useless. But if you've got what it takes, I'll turn you into something worth looking at. If not..." He paused dramatically, letting the threat hang in the air. "You'll be gone before breakfast." Marcus listened carefully, keeping his posture rigid and his gaze fixed ahead. He knew this part of the process. Every recruit did. The drill sergeant's job was to break them down so they could be rebuilt stronger. Still, there was something about Briggs's tone that made Marcus uneasy. There was an edge to it, a bitterness that went beyond the usual tough guy act. Briggs stopped pacing and pointed directly at Marcus. "You there," he shouted. "What's your name?" "Sir, Private Marcus Johnson, sir," Marcus replied loudly, his voice steady despite the sudden attention. Briggs narrowed his eyes. "Johnson, huh? What makes you think you belong here? You look like someone who'd rather be shooting hoops than serving your country." The comment caught Marcus off guard, but he didn't let it show. He kept his composure and responded firmly. "Sir, I'm here to serve my country, just like everyone else." Briggs snorted. "We'll see about that. For now, you better keep up or get out. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Marcus answered without hesitation. For the rest of the evening, Briggs continued to push the recruits hard. They were ordered to march in formation, carry heavy equipment across the field, and perform endless push-ups under the fading sunlight. Every movement had to be precise. Every command had to be followed instantly. Anyone who faltered faced harsh criticism from Briggs, but Marcus noticed that the drill sergeant seemed particularly focused on him. Whenever Marcus completed a task correctly, Briggs dismissed it as luck. When he hesitated, even for a split second, Briggs pounced on him like a hawk. By the time night fell, the recruits were exhausted. They trudged back to the barracks, dragging their feet and groaning softly. Inside, the air smelled faintly of wood and sweat. Bunk beds lined the walls, each one neatly made with crisp white sheets. Marcus claimed an empty bed near the window and dropped his bag onto the floor. He sat down heavily, rubbing his temples. His muscles ached, and his mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. Ryan Carter, another recruit who had been assigned to the same bunk room, sat down on the bed next to Marcus. Ryan was shorter than Marcus, with sandy blonde hair and freckles scattered across his cheeks. He glanced around to make sure no one was listening before leaning closer. "Hey," Ryan whispered. "That guy really has it out for you, doesn't he?" Marcus shrugged. "I don't know why. Maybe he just likes yelling." Ryan shook his head. "No, it's more than that. I've seen how he treats the rest of us. With you, it's different. Like he's trying to prove something. Marcus frowned. He hadn't considered that possibility, but it made sense. Briggs's comments earlier had felt personal, almost like they were meant to provoke him. Still, Marcus wasn't about to let it bother him too much. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter, he said finally. I'm not here to make friends with him. I'm here to do my job. Ryan nodded slowly. Fair enough. Just watch yourself, okay? Guys like that can make life miserable if you give them the chance. Marcus appreciated the concern, but he wasn't worried. Growing up, he had faced challenges far greater than a drill sergeant with a chip on his shoulder. His father had taught him the importance of resilience, of standing strong even when things got tough. Those lessons would carry him through this experience no matter how difficult it became. As the lights dimmed and the room grew quiet, Marcus lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Outside, crickets chirped softly, and the occasional breeze rustled the leaves of nearby trees. Despite the physical exhaustion, sleep eluded him. His mind kept replaying the events of the day, the shouting, the drills, the way Briggs had singled him out. Something about it didn't sit right, but Marcus couldn't put his finger on what exactly it was. Eventually, he drifted off, dreaming of his father's stories. He saw images of battles fought and won, of medals pinned to uniforms, and of proud smiles exchanged between comrades. In his dream, his father stood beside him, patting him on the shoulder and saying, "You've got this, son. Just stay true to yourself." When morning arrived, Marcus woke up feeling determined. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head on. Little did he know, the real test was only beginning, and it would force him to confront not just Briggs but also questions about identity, respect, and legacy. The next morning, the recruits were woken up before sunrise by the sharp sound of a whistle. Drill Sergeant Briggs stormed into the barracks, barking orders loud enough to shake the walls. "Get up. Move it. You've got 2 minutes to be outside. In formation or you're running laps until lunch." Marcus groaned quietly as he rolled out of bed, his body still sore from the previous day's training. He quickly pulled on his uniform, laced up his boots, and joined the others outside. The air was cool and damp, with a thin layer of mist hovering over the ground. Everyone stood at attention, trying their best to look sharp despite the early hour and their tired expressions. Briggs paced back and forth in front of them, his eyes scanning the line like a hawk searching for prey. When he reached Marcus, he stopped abruptly. "Johnson," he snapped, "why are your boots untied?" Marcus glanced down, confused. His boots were tied neatly, just like everyone else's. Before he could respond, Briggs leaned in closer. "You deaf? I said your boots are untied. Drop and give me 20 push-ups." Marcus clenched his jaw but didn't argue. He dropped to the ground and began doing push-ups, counting each one under his breath. The other recruits watched nervously, unsure whether to feel sorry for him or relieved that they weren't the ones being targeted. When Marcus finished, Briggs loomed over him again. "Stand up. Faster than that, Johnson. Do you think the enemy is going to wait around while you—" "Take your sweet time." "Yes, sir," Marcus replied calmly, getting back to his feet. He wiped his palms on his pants and resumed his position in line. Despite the unfair treatment, he refused to let Briggs see him get rattled. Deep down, though, he couldn't help wondering why the drill sergeant seemed so determined to make things difficult for him. Over the next few days, the pattern continued. Briggs found fault with everything Marcus did. If his shirt wasn't tucked in perfectly, he had to do extra laps. If his rifle wasn't clean to Briggs' exact standards, he stayed late after training to fix it. Even when Marcus performed exceptionally well, Briggs dismissed his efforts. "Good job, Carter," Briggs said one afternoon during target practice. Ryan had hit the bullseye 3 times in a row, earning praise from the drill sergeant. But when Marcus stepped up and matched Ryan's performance, Briggs barely acknowledged it. "Lucky shots," he muttered, walking away without another word. The constant criticism weighed on Marcus, but he refused to let it break him. Instead, he used it as fuel to push himself harder. Every morning, he woke up earlier than the others to run extra miles. During breaks, he practiced drills until his muscles burned. And at night, when the barracks were quiet, he studied the training manuals by flashlight, determined to master every detail. Ryan noticed Marcus's dedication and started joining him during his early morning runs. At first, Marcus was hesitant. He didn't want anyone getting dragged into his problems, but Ryan insisted. "Hey, if you're gonna work this hard, I might as well tag along," he said with a grin. "Besides, we're in this together, right?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Thanks, Ryan, I appreciate it." As the weeks went by, Marcus's hard work began to pay off. His endurance improved, his aim became sharper, and his confidence grew. The other recruits started looking up to him, seeking advice or asking for tips during exercises. Even those who had initially kept their distance now treated him with respect. But no matter how much progress Marcus made, Briggs always found a way to single him out. One afternoon, during a team-building exercise, the recruits were tasked with carrying a heavy log across an obstacle course. Each group had to work together to complete the challenge within a set time limit. Marcus's team worked efficiently, communicating clearly and moving quickly. They crossed the finish line ahead of schedule, earning cheers from the other recruits. "Well done, everyone," Briggs announced, addressing the group. Then, turning to Marcus, he added, "Except you, Johnson. You held your team back. If you hadn't slowed them down, they would have finished even faster." Marcus felt a surge of frustration but managed to keep his composure. "Sir, may I speak freely?" he asked. Briggs raised an eyebrow. "Go ahead." "I carried my share of the weight, sir, and followed every instruction given to me. My teammates can confirm that." Briggs stared at him for a moment, his jaw tightening. Then, without responding, he turned and walked away. The other recruits exchanged uneasy glances, unsure what to say. Marcus sighed quietly and rejoined his team, brushing off the comment as best he could. Later that evening, after dinner, Marcus sat alone near the edge of the camp. The sun was setting again, casting long shadows across the ground. He leaned, back against a tree, staring up at the sky. Ryan approached cautiously, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. Marcus shook his head. "Not at all." Ryan handed him one of the cups and sat down beside him. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. "I don't get it, man. Why does he hate you so much? It's like he's trying to drive you out." Marcus shrugged. "Maybe he just doesn't like me, or maybe it's something else. Either way, I'm not giving him the satisfaction of seeing me quit." Ryan nodded thoughtfully. "Still, it's gotta be tough. I mean, nobody deserves to be treated like that." "It is what it is," Marcus replied. "I can't control how he acts, but I can control how I react. As long as I stay focused, I'll be fine." Ryan looked at him admiringly. "You're stronger than most people give you credit for, you know that?" Marcus chuckled softly. "Thanks, but I'm just doing what I have to do." As the conversation ended, Marcus glanced back at the horizon. The sky was ablaze with colors: deep reds, vibrant oranges, and soft purples. It reminded him of the stories his father used to tell about watching sunsets during his time in the military. Those moments of peace amidst chaos had always been special to him. Thinking about his father gave Marcus a renewed sense of purpose. No matter how hard Briggs tried to break him, he wouldn't let it happen. He owed it to himself, to his family, and to the legacy his father had left behind. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Briggs was watching him from a distance. The drill sergeant stood near the barracks, his arms crossed as he observed the young recruit. There was something about Marcus that intrigued him, something beyond the obvious talent and determination. Briggs couldn't quite put his finger on it, but deep down he knew there was more to Marcus Johnson than met the eye. That night, as the recruits settled into their bunks, Briggs retreated to his office. He sat at his desk, flipping through files and records. Something had been nagging at him ever since he first laid eyes on Marcus. The name Johnson sounded familiar, though he couldn't remember where he'd heard it before. On a whim, he decided to look it up. He opened his laptop and typed Marcus Johnson into the database. A few seconds later, a record popped up. Scanning through the information, Briggs froze when he saw the name listed under next of kin: Samuel Johnson. His heart skipped a beat. Could it be the same person? Briggs dug deeper, pulling up old military records. Sure enough, there it was. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Johnson, decorated war hero and one of the bravest men Briggs had ever known. Memories flooded back. The missions they'd served together, the camaraderie they'd shared, and the day Samuel had saved his life. Briggs remembered it vividly, the gunfire, the chaos, and Samuel throwing himself in front of him to shield him from enemy fire. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Marcus wasn't just another recruit. He was Samuel Johnson's son. The realization hit Briggs like a punch to the gut. All this time he had been treating Marcus horribly, blind to the fact that the young man came from a family he deeply respected. For the first time in years, Briggs felt genuine remorse. He sat back in his chair, staring at the screen in disbelief. What had he done? How could he have failed to recognize the connection sooner? More importantly, how could he make things right? Outside, the camp was silent except for the occasional chirp of crickets. Inside the office, Briggs wrestled with his thoughts. He knew he couldn't undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, he could start making amends. Little did Marcus know, his journey was about to take an unexpected turn. While he had been focused on proving himself, fate was working behind the scenes to bring clarity and redemption not just for him but for the man who had wronged him. The next morning, Drill Sergeant Briggs seemed quieter than usual. He walked among the recruits during breakfast, his usual sharp remarks replaced by an uncharacteristic silence. Marcus noticed the change but didn't think much of it. He was too focused on preparing for the day's training exercises. After breakfast, the recruits gathered outside for their daily briefing. Briggs stood in front of them, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. "Listen up," he barked, though his tone lacked its usual venom. "Today's exercise will test your teamwork and leadership skills. You'll be split into pairs to navigate a series of obstacles. Failure to complete the course within the time limit means extra drills for everyone." The recruits exchanged nervous glances. Pairing up meant relying on someone else, and no one wanted to be responsible for slowing down the group. Briggs scanned the line before pointing at Marcus and Ryan. "You two, stick together." Marcus raised an eyebrow but didn't question the order. Ryan gave him a small nod, signaling that they were ready. As the teams moved toward the starting point, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about Briggs. The drill sergeant's eyes lingered on him longer than usual, almost as if he were studying him. The obstacle course was grueling, designed to push the recruits to their limits. It included climbing walls, crawling under barbed wire, and crossing narrow beams suspended high above the ground. Each pair had to work together seamlessly to succeed. Marcus and Ryan started strong, communicating clearly and supporting each other through every challenge. When Ryan struggled to pull himself over a wall, Marcus reached down and helped him up without hesitation. When Marcus slipped while balancing on a beam, Ryan steadied him with a firm grip. Their teamwork impressed even the harshest observers, earning nods of approval from some of the senior officers watching nearby. As they neared the final stretch of the course, Briggs appeared unexpectedly, standing near the finish line with his arms crossed. His eyes locked onto Marcus as the young recruit approached. For a brief moment, Marcus felt uneasy, wondering if Briggs was about to criticize him again. But instead, the drill sergeant simply stepped aside and let them cross the finish line. "Well done," Briggs said gruffly, addressing both Marcus and Ryan. "Good teamwork." Marcus blinked in surprise. It was the first time Briggs had complimented him since arriving at the camp. Before he could respond, Briggs turned and walked away, leaving the recruits to catch their breath. Later that afternoon, after the exercises were over, Briggs called Marcus aside. "Johnson, come here," he said, motioning for him to follow. Marcus hesitated but obeyed, unsure what to expect. They walked to a secluded area near the barracks far from the other recruits. Briggs stopped and turned to face Marcus. For once, his voice wasn't harsh or mocking. "I looked into your background last night," he began awkwardly. "I found out who your father was." Marcus frowned, confused. My father? Yes, Briggs replied, rubbing the back of his neck. Your dad? Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Johnson. He and I served together years ago. He was a damn good soldier, one of the best I ever knew. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected this conversation. You knew my father? He asked cautiously. Briggs nodded. Yeah, we were on the same unit. He saved my life once during a mission overseas. Took a bullet for me, actually. I never forgot it. Marcus stared at him, processing the information. His father had rarely spoken about his military service in detail, so hearing this story from someone who had been there was surreal. Why are you telling me this now? He asked finally. Briggs sighed, looking uncomfortable. Because I owe him and you an apology. I've treated you like crap since you got here, and I didn't even realize who you were. If I'd known sooner. He trailed off, shaking his head. Anyway, I'm sorry. That's all I can say. Marcus didn't know how to respond. Part of him wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the resentment he'd built up over weeks of unfair treatment. But another part of him understood that people make mistakes, and sometimes they try to make things right. After a long pause, he nodded slowly. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. Briggs looked relieved, though he tried to hide it. Don't mention it, just keep doing what you're doing, okay? Your dad would be proud of you. With that, the drill sergeant turned and walked away, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. He stood there for a while, replaying the conversation in his mind. It was strange to think that Briggs, the man who had made his life miserable, was connected to his father in such a meaningful way. When Marcus returned to the barracks, Ryan was waiting for him. What did Briggs want? He asked curiously. He just wanted to talk, Marcus replied, sitting down on his bunk. He debated whether to share the details, but decided Ryan deserved to know. Turns out he served with my dad. Apparently my dad saved his life once. Ryan's eyes widened. Are you serious? That's incredible. Yeah, Marcus said quietly. He apologized for how he's treated me. Said he didn't realize who I was. Ryan whistled softly. Wow. So what happens now? I guess we move forward, Marcus replied with a shrug. It doesn't change what happened, but at least he's trying to make things right. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. That takes guts. Not many people would admit when they're wrong, especially someone like Briggs. Marcus agreed. Despite everything, he respected Briggs for owning up to his mistake. It wasn't easy to swallow. Your pride, especially in front of someone you'd treated poorly. Maybe this was the start of a new chapter, not just for Marcus, but for Briggs too. Over the next few days, the change in Briggs became more noticeable. He still pushed the recruits, hard, but his approach shifted. Instead of singling Marcus out for criticism, he offered constructive feedback and encouragement. During training exercises, he praised Marcus's efforts, acknowledging his strengths rather than dismissing them. The other recruits noticed the difference as well. At first, they were skeptical, unsure if this was just a temporary act. But as time went on, it became clear that Briggs was genuinely trying to improve. He spent more time mentoring the recruits, sharing stories from his own experiences, and offering advice on how to handle tough situations. For Marcus, the transformation was bittersweet. On one hand, he appreciated the newfound respect and support. On the other hand, he couldn't forget the weeks of mistreatment he'd endured. Still, he chose to focus on the positive. Briggs had taken responsibility for his actions, and that was worth something. One evening, after a particularly challenging day of training, Marcus received a letter from home. It was from his mother, written in her neat handwriting. He opened it carefully and began reading. Dear Marcus, I hope this letter finds you well. I know boot camp isn't easy, but I have no doubt you're handling it with the strength and determination your father always showed. Speaking of your dad, I came across some old photos of him in uniform the other day. Seeing them reminded me of how proud he was to serve his country, and how proud he would be of you. Stay strong, sweetheart. Remember why you're there, and Don't let anyone tell you that you don't belong. You're carrying on a legacy, but you're also creating your own path. We're all rooting for you. Love always." Mom Marcus folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope. Reading his mother's words brought tears to his eyes, but they were tears of gratitude. She had always believed in him, just like his father had. Now, with Briggs's apology and growing respect, Marcus felt more motivated than ever to prove himself, not just to others, but to himself. That night, as he lay in bed, Marcus reflected on how far he'd come. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had taught him valuable lessons about perseverance, forgiveness, and the power of second chances. He realized that life wasn't about holding on to anger or bitterness. It was about finding ways to move forward and grow. Outside, the stars glittered in the night sky, casting a soft glow over the camp. Marcus closed his eyes, imagining his father watching over him. In his mind, he heard his father's voice, steady and reassuring. "You're stronger than you think, son. Keep going." And with that thought, Marcus drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The days that followed Briggs's apology marked a turning point at the camp. The drill sergeant's behavior wasn't just different toward Marcus, it changed for everyone. While he still demanded discipline and pushed the recruits to their limits, there was a new sense of fairness in his approach. He stopped singling people out unfairly and instead focused on helping them improve. For many of the recruits, it felt like they had a mentor rather than an enemy. Marcus noticed the shift most of all. Briggs no longer criticized him unnecessarily or dismissed his achievements. Instead, he offered guidance and encouragement, often pulling Marcus aside after exercises to give him tips or share stories from his own military career. At first, Marcus was cautious, unsure if this change would last. But as time went on, he began to trust that Briggs was sincere in his efforts to make amends. One morning, during a particularly grueling obstacle course, Marcus found himself struggling with a climbing wall. Despite his strength and determination, the slick surface made it difficult to get a good grip. He slipped twice, landing hard on the ground below. Frustrated, he glanced up at the wall, wondering if he should try again. "Need a hand?" Briggs called out, jogging over to where Marcus stood. Marcus hesitated but nodded. "Yes, sir." Briggs didn't bark orders or mock him. Instead, he knelt down beside Marcus and pointed to a specific spot on the wall. "See that groove? Use it as leverage. Shift your weight forward when you reach the top." Marcus followed the advice, focusing on the technique Briggs had shared. This time, he managed to pull himself up and clear the wall without slipping. When he dropped down on the other side, he looked back at Briggs, who gave him a rare smile. "Good job, Johnson. Keep it up." The moment felt surreal. Just weeks earlier, Marcus couldn't imagine receiving praise from Briggs, let alone seeing him offer genuine help. Yet here they were, working together like teammates rather than adversaries. It was a small victory, but it meant a lot to Marcus. As the weeks passed, Marcus continued to excel. His hard work paid off not only in his physical performance but also in his leadership skills. Other recruits began looking to him for guidance, especially during group exercises. He earned their respect not by asserting dominance, but by showing kindness and patience, even when things got tough. Ryan was one of Marcus's biggest supporters. The two had grown close over the months, forming a bond that went beyond their shared early morning runs. Ryan admired Marcus's resilience and quiet confidence, while Marcus appreciated Ryan's humor and loyalty. Together, they became an unstoppable team, pushing each other to do their best. One evening, after a long day of training, Marcus and Ryan sat outside the barracks watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the air smelled faintly of pine trees. They talked about everything: their families, their dreams, and what they hoped to achieve once boot camp was over. "You ever think about what comes next?" Ryan asked, tossing a pebble into the dirt. Marcus shrugged. "Sometimes. I know I want to make my dad proud, but I also want to find my own path." "What about you?" Ryan grinned. "I figure if I can survive this place, I can handle anything. Maybe I'll try for officer training someday." Marcus smiled. "You'd be great at it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, enjoying the peaceful moment. Then Ryan turned to Marcus with a serious expression. You know, I've been thinking, you've handled all this stuff with Briggs so well. Most people would have cracked under that kind of pressure, but you didn't. You stayed strong. It wasn't easy, Marcus admitted. There were times I wanted to quit, but I kept reminding myself why I was here. My dad always said that. Real strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every time you do. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. Your dad sounds like a pretty amazing guy. He was, Marcus replied softly. And I hope I can live up to his example. Unbeknownst to Marcus, Briggs was nearby, observing the conversation from a distance. He leaned against a tree, arms crossed, listening intently. Hearing Marcus talk about his father brought back memories, both good and painful. Briggs remembered the camaraderie they had shared, the battles they had fought side by side, and the day Samuel Johnson had risked his life to save him. Those memories were bittersweet, but they reminded Briggs of the kind of man Samuel had been, and the kind of man Marcus was becoming. That night, Briggs sat in his office staring at an old photograph on his desk. It showed him and Samuel standing side by side, smiling proudly in front of a military vehicle. Their uniforms were dusty, and their faces bore the signs of exhaustion, but their eyes sparkled with triumph. Briggs picked up the photo and traced the outline of Samuel's face with his finger. He had carried guilt for years, knowing that Samuel's injuries had ended his military career prematurely. Though Samuel had never held it against him, Briggs had always felt responsible. Now, meeting Marcus had reopened old wounds, but it had also given him a chance to honor Samuel's memory in a new way. By supporting Marcus, Briggs felt like he was repaying a debt he could never fully settle. The next day, Briggs gathered the recruits for a briefing. As usual, they stood at attention, waiting for instructions. But this time, Briggs didn't launch into a tirade or assign extra drills. Instead, he spoke in a calm, measured tone. Listen up, he began. You're nearing the end of your training, and I want to say something important. Being a soldier isn't just about following orders or completing missions. It's about integrity, courage, and taking care of the people around you. Some of you have already shown those qualities and others are still learning. That's okay, we're all works in progress. His gaze lingered on Marcus for a moment before moving to the rest of the group. When you leave here, remember why you started. Remember the sacrifices made by those who came before you. And above all, remember that you're part of something bigger than yourselves. If you carry that mindset with you, you'll succeed, not just as soldiers, but as human beings. The recruits exchanged surprised glances. This was the first time Briggs had spoken to them with such sincerity, and it left a lasting impression. Even Marcus, who had grown used to Briggs's occasional moments of vulnerability, felt moved by the speech. After the briefing, Marcus approached Briggs tentatively. Sir, can I ask you something? Briggs raised an eyebrow. Go ahead. Why did you decide to start mentoring us differently? I mean, it's not just me. You've changed how you treat everyone. Briggs sighed, leaning against a nearby table. Let's just say I've learned some things recently that made me rethink my priorities. Your dad taught me a lot back in the day, and seeing you here reminded me of that. I realized I wasn't living up to the standards he set, or the ones I should have been setting for myself. Marcus nodded slowly. Thank you, sir, that means a lot. Briggs waved a hand dismissively. Don't thank me. Just keep doing what you're doing, okay? You're making your dad proud. As Marcus walked away, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Briggs's words reinforced what he already knew. This journey wasn't just about proving himself to others. It was about honoring his father's legacy while forging his own identity. Boot camp was coming to an end, and the final week was filled with intense evaluations and ceremonies. The recruits poured every ounce of energy into their tasks, determined to finish strong. On the last day, they gathered for a formal graduation ceremony. Families and friends were invited to attend, filling the bleachers with proud smiles and teary eyes. When it was Marcus's turn to step forward and receive his certificate, he scanned the crowd until he spotted his mother. She was sitting near the front, clutching a tissue in one hand and waving enthusiastically with the other. Her eyes shone with pride as she mouthed the words, "I'm so proud of you." Standing beside her was an older man Marcus didn't recognize at first. It took him a moment to realize it was Briggs, wearing civilian clothes and holding the photograph of him and Samuel. Seeing the drill sergeant there, a man who had once treated him so harshly but had since become a source of support, made Marcus's chest swell with emotion. After the ceremony, Marcus sought out Briggs. "Sir, I didn't expect to see you here," he said, shaking the man's hand. "I wouldn't miss it," Briggs replied gruffly. "Your dad was a hero, Marcus, and you've done him proud." Marcus nodded, fighting back tears. "Thank you, sir, for everything." Briggs clapped him on the shoulder. "Take care of yourself, son. The world needs more people like you." As Marcus rejoined his mother and the other recruits, he reflected on how far he'd come. Boot camp had tested him in ways he hadn't anticipated, but it had also taught him valuable lessons about resilience, forgiveness, and growth. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was ready to face it head-on. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus stood outside the barracks one last time. The camp was quiet now, bathed in the soft glow of twilight. He closed his eyes and imagined his father standing beside him, offering words of encouragement. In his heart, he knew Samuel would be proud, not because Marcus had succeeded, but because he had stayed true to himself. With a deep breath, Marcus turned and walked away, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The morning after the graduation ceremony, the camp was unusually quiet. Most of the recruits had already packed their belongings and said their goodbyes, ready to move on to the next chapter of their lives. Marcus stood outside the barracks, his duffel bag slung over his shoulder, taking one last look at the place that had tested him in ways he never imagined. The dirt roads, the obstacle courses, and even the harsh shouts of Drill Sergeant Briggs now felt like pieces of a puzzle that had shaped him into someone stronger. Ryan approached him carrying his own bag. "Ready to go?" he asked with a grin. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, I think so. It's strange, though. Feels like just yesterday we were stepping off that bus." Ryan chuckled. "Time flies when you're getting yelled at, huh?" They shared a laugh, but there was a tinge of sadness in the air. Despite the challenges they'd faced, the bonds they'd formed were unbreakable. Ryan extended his hand and Marcus shook it firmly. "Take care of yourself, man," Ryan said. "And don't forget to write." "You too," Marcus replied. "We'll catch up soon." As Ryan walked away, Marcus turned his attention back to the camp. He spotted Briggs standing near the entrance, watching silently as the remaining recruits prepared to leave. For a moment, Marcus hesitated, unsure whether to approach him. But then he remembered the journey they'd been through, together, the unfair treatment, the apology, and the eventual respect they'd built. With a deep breath, he walked over. "Sir," Marcus said, stopping a few feet away. "I wanted to say thank you for everything." Briggs looked surprised but quickly masked it with his usual gruff demeanor. "Don't mention it, Johnson. You earned your place here, just keep doing what you're doing." Marcus smiled faintly. "I will, sir, and I hope you'll keep doing what you're doing too. You've made a real difference for all of us." Briggs shifted uncomfortably, clearly unaccustomed to receiving praise. "Just doing my job," he muttered, though there was a hint of pride in his voice. Before Marcus could respond, a car pulled up to the curb. His mother stepped out, her face lighting up when she saw him. She hurried over and wrapped him in a tight hug. "Oh, Marcus," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." "I know, Mom," Marcus replied, hugging her back. "Thanks for being here." Briggs watched the exchange from a distance, his expression softening. He remembered the countless times Samuel Johnson had spoken about his family during their time in the military. The love and pride in Marcus's mother's eyes reminded him of the same warmth Samuel had always carried with him. Briggs felt a pang of guilt, but also a sense of gratitude for having known Samuel, for meeting Marcus, and for the chance to make things right. After a few minutes, Marcus introduced his mother to Briggs. "Mom, this is Drill Sergeant Briggs. He served with Dad. Briggs extended his hand and Marcus's mother shook it warmly. "It's an honor to meet you," she said. "Samuel spoke highly of you." Briggs cleared his throat, visibly moved. "The honor was mine, ma'am. Your husband was one of the finest men I ever knew. And your son, well, he's following in some pretty big footsteps." Tears welled up in her eyes as she smiled. "Thank you, Sergeant. That means the world to me." The three of them stood there for a moment, sharing a connection that transcended words. Finally, Marcus picked up his bag and turned to his mother. "We should get going, Mom. There's still a lot to do before I start my next assignment." She nodded, wiping her tears. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's go." As they walked toward the car, Marcus glanced back at Briggs one last time. The drill sergeant gave him a small nod, a gesture that spoke volumes. Marcus returned the nod before climbing into the passenger seat. The drive home was filled with conversation. Marcus's mother asked about his experiences at boot camp, and he told her stories, some funny, some challenging, and some inspiring. He didn't shy away from mentioning how hard Briggs had been on him at first, but he also emphasized how much the drill sergeant had changed. "He's not a bad guy, Mom," Marcus said. "He just needed a reminder of who he used to be." His mother smiled knowingly. "People aren't always what they seem, Marcus. Sometimes they need a little help finding their way back to themselves." Marcus thought about that as they drove past fields and forests, the scenery blurring together. He realized how true her words were, not just for Briggs, but for everyone. People made mistakes, but they also had the capacity to grow and change. It was a lesson he would carry with him wherever he went. When they arrived home, Marcus was greeted by familiar sights and smells. The house hadn't changed much since he'd left, but he felt different. Boot camp had taught him discipline, resilience, and the importance of staying true to himself. As he unpacked his bag and settled back into his room, he couldn't help but reflect on how far he'd come. That evening, Marcus sat on the porch with his mother, sipping lemonade and watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over the yard. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the chaos of boot camp. "You know," his mother said after a while, "your father would be so proud of you, not just because you graduated, but because of the kind of person you've become." Marcus nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I hope so, Mom. I really do." "He would be," she insisted. "You've handled everything with grace and strength. That's exactly what he would have wanted for you." They sat in silence for a while, enjoying each other's company. Then Marcus spoke up. "Do you think Dad ever doubted himself? Did he ever feel like he wasn't good enough?" His mother smiled softly. "Oh, Marcus, of course he did. Everyone has moments of doubt. But your father always reminded himself of why he started, and he kept going no matter what. That's what made him special." Marcus absorbed her words, letting them sink in. He realized that doubt wasn't a sign of weakness. It was part of being human. What mattered was how you responded to it. His father had pushed through his doubts, and so would he. The next few weeks flew by as Marcus prepared for his next assignment. He attended meetings, completed paperwork, and trained to ensure he was ready for whatever lay ahead. Though he was excited about the future, he couldn't help but miss the camaraderie of boot camp. Ryan called often, keeping him updated on his own progress, and they promised to stay in touch no matter where life took them. One afternoon, Marcus received a letter in the mail. The envelope bore the return address of the military base where he'd trained. Curious, he opened it and found a handwritten note inside. "Marcus, I'm not great at saying things like this, but I wanted to let you know how proud I am of you. You've shown incredible strength and character, and I have no doubt you'll continue to do amazing things. Your dad would be proud, not just of what you've accomplished, but of the person you are. If you ever need anything, or just want to talk, you know where to find me." Briggs Marcus read the note several times, feeling a mix of emotions. It was unexpected but deeply meaningful. Briggs wasn't the type to express gratitude easily, which made the gesture even more powerful. Marcus tucked the letter into his desk drawer, knowing it was something he'd treasure forever. As the days turned into weeks, Marcus continued to grow, not just as a soldier, but as a person. He carried the lessons he'd learned with him, using them to navigate the challenges of his new role. He remained humble, remembering the sacrifices made by those who came before him, and he stayed focused on his goals, determined to honor his father's legacy while carving out his own path. Boot camp had been the beginning of Marcus' journey, but it was far from the end. He knew there would be obstacles ahead, moments of doubt, and times when he'd question whether he was strong enough. But he also knew that he had the tools to overcome them: resilience, determination, and the support of those who believed in him. On his first day at his new post, Marcus stood tall in his uniform, ready to face whatever came his way. As he looked around at his fellow soldiers, he felt a sense of belonging, a reminder that he was part of something bigger than himself. In that moment, Marcus understood what his father had always tried to teach him. True strength comes not from never falling, but from rising every time you do. And with that knowledge, he stepped forward, ready to embrace the future with courage and purpose.